Tell me about your childhood and when you were born.
I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in March 15th of 1928. You want to know more than that?
Where did you live?
Lived in Grand Rapids. City born and bred. Didn't ever lived on a farm. Don't have the foggiest idea about cows, horses, growing anything. I was born and bred and educated in the city.
What do you remember about your economic situation?
It was in the middle of the Depression. My dad was working for the government as a postal inspector, making $17 a week. We have some friends that was working for a company called Grandy Brick Company, and he was a foreman, ran the whole place, and he was making $8 a week. Now that's pretty poor wages by today's standards.
Oh. Tell me about your parents.
My father, as I just said in the previous segment, was a postal inspector, and my mother went back and became a school teacher. I had one brother, and when we got into World War II, and everybody was disappearing into the service, then my mother went back and taught school for a number of years.
What do you recall about race relations?
There was no problem at that time. We had, for instance, my high school class had 186 people that graduated, and we had no racial problems because there was no race with us other than the white race. No Asians, no African Americans. There were a few in the school, but we had none in our class.
What kind of things did you do for entertainment?
Chased girls. Kidding. We used to play out at night. We played a game called Kick the Can. And we had just took a tin can, and we would set it up, and then one person would be it, and everybody would disappear, and he would have to go see if he could find somebody, and if somebody could come around and kick the can before he found all of us, then we were free and could do it all over again. We didn't have movies. Well, we had movies, but we very seldom went. We had no television. So that was about it.
Okay. As a 16-year-old, what kind of responsibilities did you have?
Actually, we had a lot of responsibilities. When I was 16, a friend of mine his name was Harold Hansen, and I took off. We had $60 each, and we took off and hitchhiked across the United States for 6 weeks. And we slept in fields. We ate apples off trees. One night we couldn't get a ride. We'd been somewhere, and finally we went to a bus station, bought a ticket, and rode overnight to Pittsburgh. And I remember we did that because that gave us a place to sleep, and it gave us we moved across the country some. But we were pretty independent at 16.
Okay. What was church life like?
Church life, I think, was pretty much as it is today. We went to Sunday school, went to the sermons. It was a tradition, an hour and a half service, and then we had about an hour of Sunday school afterwards with religious instruction.
What were some significant historical events that occurred, and how do you think they shaped your view of America?
Well, I think one of the major ones was when World War II started, Pearl Harbor. And I was 7th or 8th grader at that time. And I remember going into the next day, on Monday, they took us into the high school auditorium, and I listened to President Roosevelt give his Day of Infamy speech about the Japanese and the attack on the United States.
What technological advances that you have seen in your lifetime do you think have most improved the world today?
Well, of course, there have been so many advances in electronics. When I was a youth, there was no television. We had a telephone, but it was a four-party line, and everybody listened in on it. And so there have been so many technological advantages since then, or advancements, with internet, computers. And at that time, computers were absolutely huge, and they were all tubes, like were in the radios. And they had to be in air-conditioned buildings and air-conditioned rooms because they developed so much heat, used so much energy, that you couldn't have them as they have them today with the diodes and the little chips that they have.
Tell me about your first car.
Oh, my first car was after I had graduated. It was my dad's car, and we drove that during the war. It was a 1937 Chevrolet four-door. And my dad got a new car in 1947, got a brand new Ford, and I bought his 1937 Chevrolet for $75. And that was my first car.
What kind of diseases were common when you were a child, and did you encounter any?
All commonhood diseases. We had mumps and chicken pox and German measles, and the thing that affected me the most was scarlet fever. And at that time, they had no cures. There was a big sign went up on your house that you were quarantined for at least a month. And my dad had to live down the basement. He could not live with us. The problem with scarlet fever is that it turned many times into rheumatic fever, which it did in my case, and I was confined then to my bed. I was 9 years old when that happened. Had my 10th birthday in bed, but I was confined to bed for 6 months. I never got up, and we had no television. I had a little radio that I could listen to. Couldn't talk on the telephone because that was attached to the wall in the other room. And that's the way I spent 6 months of my life, was confined to my bed.
Okay, and last, elaborate on sports you played or watched.
Well, after I'd had that rheumatic fever problem, I had some heart murmurs, and so I did not play. They would not allow me to play a lot of physical sports. I did watch them. We had football and basketball in our high school, and that was the main sports that we had. We didn't have, there was some tennis, but it was not very prominent. Other than that, that was about the extent of what our physical activities were.
Okay, well, that's all we have, so thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for asking. It was kind of interesting talking to you. Did you get that all, Dad?